Well, we've been doing our show for several weeks now, so I think it's time to throw in some controversy. See, when we're talking about the power of one, obviously we're highlighting a lot of people who had dreams and visions that did something wonderful and powerful for all mankind, and that's great. But then again, there's lots of people who had a dream and a vision, and they were controversial. They were people who attained an amazing amount of success, impacted millions of lives, but they did it in a very controversial manner. So tonight will be our first controversial subject on the power of one. Have you seen the commercial that's been on lately? The one that starts off saying Elvis Presley changed the music. Then it goes to Michael Jordan, changed sport. Then it goes to Richard Pryor, changed comedy. And then the last person that it's featuring is a person who changed radio. And you know what, folks? Like it or not, undeniably, that's a gentleman named Howard Stern. Howard Stern is one of those people that you either love him or you hate him. There's somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 million listeners that pay money every month to listen to a satellite radio show that love him, obviously, or they wouldn't be paying the money and following him for the last 10 or 20 years. And then obviously there's a lot of people who don't like the quality of the content of what he's doing. They feel like it's very bad morally, and once again, I'm not here to say one way or the other. What I'm trying to share with you is here's an individual that undeniably has an amazing success story. Here's a gentleman, if you ever saw his movie Private Parts, which I do recommend to people, okay? Yeah, there's some R-rated stuff in there, and there's a little bit of nudity, and I don't think I'd show it to my child right now, but it is a tremendous, honest success story of what this gentleman went through. He was somebody who was not real confident in high school, didn't have a whole lot going on. Even in college, he was kind of a loner and so on and so forth by his own admission. And then he went out and he decided to get into journalism. He was inspired by his dad. His dad was not an on-air personality, but he worked at a radio station and he was around it a lot, and he used to do his own little shows, you know, growing up as a child. But once again, he had a dream and a vision. He thought that he could be on-air entertaining people. Now, he got his first job, I believe, in Hartford, and he was paid something like $15,000 a year, barely enough to get by on, but he had a passion for doing what he was doing. The difference with Howard was instead of doing it the way everybody else did it, he had a belief that it should be done differently. Instead of being a disc jockey and just playing records and talking briefly here and there in between the records, was what everybody else was doing. He wanted to talk and entertain all the time and occasionally play a record. Now, needless to say, since that was a complete paradigm shift on what the entire radio industry was doing, nobody, all of his program directors told him he was crazy, he was getting in trouble all the time. Now, this is when I was listening to him. Back in the day when I lived in New Jersey and he had first come to New York radio, I just got a kick out of him. I was a door-to-door salesperson at that point, or at least I was an in-the-field salesman. The time of day he was on, I was driving around from appointment to appointment, and I got to tell you, listening to him made me laugh. And this was before he had strippers coming on the show, and I understand that it got a little over the edge with all that kind of stuff, but I got hooked on Howard listening to him when it was just funny. And most of what made it so funny is how the executives at NBC Radio were so upset with him and how he was constantly battling them to do the show the way he wanted to do the show. And once again, if you watch the movie, you'll see what happens. He lost some of his key staff members. He had to fight to get them back. He had management completely against him. He ended up getting fired from that job. And once again, instead of doing what so many people would have done and saying, man, I was wrong, maybe I should go back and do it the way everybody else is doing, he stuck to his guns. He got another job on an FM station in the morning, which was really what he wanted all along anyway. And he was able to go on and become the most popular DJ at his show, syndicated all throughout the United States, became wildly successful. But he kept having problems with the FTC. They kept finding him in the stations, and admittedly, a lot of what he was doing was off color. Admittedly, a lot of what he was doing was, you know, being in the gray area, the dark gray area of what you could get along with. And there's been times when I'm listening to him and it's too much for me. And all I do is turn the channel for those few moments. But inevitably, I end up going back to the dial because the guy is just flat funny. And it's not just him. Robin Quivers, Artie Lang, Boy Gary, or Baba Booey if you watch the show, everyone, Fred, all the regulars there, they just have a tremendous chemistry, very much like the ensemble cast of a great TV show, a great sitcom. They just all work real well together. And the bottom line is, after his run on regular radio, what they now call terrestrial radio, was over, he took the biggest leap of all into satellite radio, and he was paid a lot of money to do it. I believe it's $100 million a year is what I've read, but it was a lot of money, that's for sure. And the reality is, no one knew if it would really work or not. And now he's been there for several years. They've accumulated well over 20 million listeners. And I got to share with you that Sirius Radio, Sirius XM now, they've merged together, would have virtually no shot of being in business anymore if it wasn't for Howard and the power he has with his fan base. So I'm just sharing with you guys the power of one person believing that things needed to be done differently. And on regular radio or on satellite radio now, you can hear there are very, very few shows that are just music being played with a DJ in between. Howard has had a massive influence on literally hundreds of radio shows all over the United States and probably all over the world because he had a vision of the way things needed to be done. So whether you like his off-color humor or not, whether you like him as an individual or not, it's undeniable that one individual had a power that changed the entire radio broadcasting industry and made a complete paradigm shift. Howard Stern is someone I like. He's not someone you need to like, but it's undeniable that Howard is a great example of the power of one.